Well, throughout this episode and through many of our episodes, one of the themes we keep coming back to is the way in which the green movement is hostile towards human flourishing. And it certainly, in my experience discussing this with people, and I hear it many times when you're interviewed, Alex, that gets pushback. And now, if you actually read them, particularly when they're talking to each other, yeah, I think it's very apparent that like their goal is not to promote human flourishing, but I think it's also apparent just from their policy goals. And so I wanted to highlight two more pieces where I think this really comes through. One in particular, we can be pretty brief on because we talked about it in conjunction with Greta Thunberg not flying, but an article from Spiked Online called The War on Cheap Flights is highlighting a debate that's going on in the UK right now about taxing travel and particularly air travel on the grounds that like this is not green. And which is true. I mean, every form of travel has a huge amount of impact, whether it's obviously, the use of fossil fuels, but even just the infrastructure, how much, the roads, even if you had, we talked about in Germany, this idea of like electrifying all of the driving space, which would be a ton of impact. Even EVs, that one of the biggest sources of air emissions from cars doesn't come from the exhaust, but the wear on the tires, which turns into emissions. And you cannot travel without impact. And part of what the Greens are arguing here is that it's precisely we should be traveling less and penalizing the people who travel the most. Then a article that just came out today in the Wall Street Journal. This is from Richard Tren, who's a co-founder of Africa Fighting Malaria. He has quite a powerful piece where he talks about how Target Malaria, which is a Gates Foundation supported research effort, is trying to develop genetically modified sterile mosquitoes. And the goal is to reduce those populations because mosquitoes spread malaria, which is one of the deadliest diseases on Earth. And a coalition of 40 leading environmental and civil society organizations, he points out, is demanding the product be shut down immediately. And this shouldn't be a surprise because this movement has a long history of opposition to genetic technology. And the one example he cites is an example that's come up, I think, in some of the older episodes of Power Hour, which is the efforts by Greenpeace and others to stop golden rice, which could save up to 2 million people a year, mostly kids, from early death and crippling blindness from vitamin A deficiency. And he points out that a petition signed by 144 Nobel laureates called them to environmentalists to end these campaigns and actually accused Greenpeace, which I think is true, of crimes against humanity. But then he goes on to talk about something that I'm not that familiar with, which is this new trend of agroecology. And it's a radical approach to food production that excludes modern farming techniques, including synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, modern hybrid seeds, and even mechanization. Agroecology, he says, explicitly promotes peasant agriculture and the superior wisdom of indigenous peoples. And now you might think, all right, of course, every movement has its crazy ideas, but this has actually been officially adopted by the Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, of the United Nations, the UN Development Program, and the UN Environment Program. And FAO Steering Committee member Miguel Altieri, he describes the Green Revolution, which is the agricultural revolution that we usually credit with saving over 1 billion lives. He called it a failed project that undermined the ability to address the root causes of hunger, whatever those are, and put global, I'm sure it's capitalism, and put global food production under the control of a few transnational corporations bolstered by free trade agreements. And according to FAO's data, the author points out, though, the Green Revolution increased food-wide supply by hundreds of calories per person each year, even when the global population more than doubled. And this was actually a recent study promoted by agroecologists acknowledged that their policies would reduce food production by 35% in Europe, and they nonetheless endorse it. And so, I mean, I think you see the green ideal. Don't eat, don't travel, don't protect yourself from disease, live or rather die like primitives.
Another aspect to the to the green movement that I've been thinking of a lot lately is just how anti-freedom it is, in terms of not just, there's no right to transform nature. I think that's the key way in which is anti-freedom, but also, I mean, related, it's anti-free market, as in anti-freedom of production and trade. And if you think about agriculture, so we think about, we talk about the green revolution, and notice it's criticized in part because it's transnational corporations involved. But what that really means is that people free to produce in trade were able to discover and put into practice methods of food production that allow billions of people to get the food that they need daily. And that's an amazing achievement. It's the achievement of, really millions of people who are coordinating uh, together, including, what they're really doing is they're figuring out ways to make a profit. They're figuring, each farmer is trying to figure out, okay, how can I produce food that's worth X to people, and then make it for less than X. And there's just this incredible process of all of these people pursuing profit, which, from a certain perspective, means pursuing a resource efficient way of producing things. And that's what has led to this amazing abundance of food. But it's important that it's millions of people working in coordination, and that they're free to discover the best methods, and that they are also left to fail when they're wrong. When you think about just how these issues are being discussed with the UNEP and these, with the UN. I mean, the UN is supposed to be it doesn't have any exact authority, but it's a government type thing. So it's really this is a kind of government planning approach where we bring together a gang of experts, and they say, let's say it's 100 people or 500 people or 10 people, whatever it is. It's some very small number of people who are saying, hey, we can dictate how food should be produced. And so we have this idea, and I'm sure, and this idea is a horrible idea because it's an idea that's against transforming nature. So it's going to be just destructive because it's just got this anti-production root to it. But also, how the hell are they going to know what even if with the new method of, like, what global food production should look like and how it can actually be efficient and profitable for billions of people? Like, there's no way they can have any idea. So in practice, it's just, I just want to stress that we've with these global issues, we've gotten into the practice of just assuming that these government agencies and committees of experts can uh, not only it's okay to pick these green ideologies, but that they can somehow plan the global economy in some way, even if their idea was right. And so what we have is this combination of deliberately bad economic ideas, and then people trying to practice them in ways that are impossible to be truly efficient, as in having a few central people figuring it out for billions of people, instead of leaving the billions of people to figure it out for themselves, including with the millions of people who are specialists in how to produce different kinds of agriculture for different purposes, for people of different kinds of means and preferences, given the availability of different resources at a given time. That's the kind of thing that is that you need billions of free people to do. It's Nobody can figure it out in advance.